All right, let us say hello to our next guest, one of the newest members of the One Championship roster. We found out recently that he has signed with the promotion to compete in grappling and eventually in the world of mixed martial arts. Big news for Gordon Ryan. Gordon, how are you, man?
Good. How's everything?
Everything is great. It's great to have you here. This was a great move for all involved. So let's begin with how this all came together. How did this all happen, this relationship between you and One Championship?
Yeah, this was actually a long time in the making. When I competed in 2017 ADCC and I won, Gary had wanted to start fighting MMA after that. So One initially contacted Gary, and Chantry was talking to Gary, and they were trying to sign him. And they also want to sign me. So I was like, I just won my first ADCC. Maybe I was still young. I was only 22. I was like, maybe I'll stick to grappling for a few more years and then eventually sign to do MMA. So 2017 ADCC happened. And then I was preparing, I was like sparring and, getting ready to fight MMA and, learning new skills. Gary had already signed with One. And then we went to fast forward 2019. I hurt my knee. So I had a catastrophic knee injury where I needed to get LCL surgery. And then I came back from the rehab from that. And that pretty much just led me right into a 2019 ADCC camp. So MMA kind of got placed in the back burner because I hurt my knee. I couldn't train for like 4 months. And then the second I could train, I wasn't focusing on MMA because I had 2019 ADCC camp coming up. And I was in a position where I was just coming off a huge knee injury and I needed to focus solely on jiu-jitsu to make sure that I was ready for 2019 ADCC. So then I did 2019 ADCC. Chantry messaged me again and he was like, hey, do you want to come fight MMA? And, then I won the absolute and my main focus was fighting Andre at the next ADCC. So I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm going to do MMA just yet, if I'm going to do it at all. Because my main focus now is to do the super fight. It's the only thing I haven't won in no-gi jiu-jitsu. So I said, let's, if you want, we could do, a grappling contract. And if I ever choose to fight MMA, then I'll fight for One. But I said, let's just do a grappling contract for now because my main focus still is grappling. And then if I ever choose to fight, then we'll move it into that.
So where would you say you are like in that road to MMA? Like, let's just say like 0 is not interested at all. We're never going to do it. 10 is like, I'm right there. I'm ready for my first fight. Like, where are you right now?
As far as excitement, I've always wanted to fight MMA. As far as like from a technical standpoint, I'm not very close to being able to fight. I'm still just like terrible in most areas of MMA, and shoot boxing and wall wrestling and just striking in general. But as far as excitement, I've always wanted to fight MMA. It's something that I'm kind of torn between because John really wants me to stay with grappling just because, grappling is kind of in a position now where it can kind of start taking off as a real sport. And I'm at the forefront of that. So to leave grappling now, grappling, jiu-jitsu is like my first love as far as combat goes. So to leave jiu-jitsu now, where it's just on the cusp of, breaking into that next level, will kind of be a disservice to grappling. So John wants me to stay with grappling. I was always excited to fight MMA. Gary's fighting MMA. So technically I'm not anywhere close yet. Excited wise, I'm always excited. I was always excited to fight. The whole reason why I started training jiu-jitsu in the first place was initially to fight MMA. Now I'm in a position where I still want to, but I still have some things I have to accomplish in jiu-jitsu first, before I start moving into that direction.
Because you're 24, right? Just 20, 25. You're 25. So you're 12 years younger than me. You're not even near your athletic prime yet. So, the time for you to compete in MMA, there's really no rush, right? Like you could still focus on grappling for the next 5-6 years if you want to, and then go in MMA. Like the time is on your side, so to speak. Is that kind of how you're looking at it?
Yeah. There's a ton of time for me to compete in MMA. And I know that once I go to MMA, it's going to be something that I focus 100% on. I feel like if I ever do make a transition to MMA, I'll do grappling matches here and there, but I feel like, if I do something, I do it 100%. And if I feel like I can't focus 100% on grappling, then I'll probably stick to just preparing for MMA fights. So, grappling is something I'm just not ready to leave at this moment. Maybe I will be in the future. But I love grappling. It's much more, you have a much longer career in grappling. It's much more enjoyable to practice day to day. And I love where the sport is going. I love the innovations that our team is making. And, every day it's something new with John. It's just, you're working on something. It's not like I'm doing the same old stuff for, the last 2-3 years. Like, we're working on something new every single day. So it's still exciting. It's still fun for me, and I love it. And it's something I'm not stepping away from right now, but maybe in the future.
I agree with you that grappling and, the no-gi jiu-jitsu and the tournaments and all that stuff. And we're seeing all these different, like Chael, obviously with Submission Underground is big. Quintet tried some different things. It's starting to take off. Like, I feel like you said, like, it's on the cusp of getting to that next level. I'm curious why it has taken so long, because I love it. Like, I love watching Submission Underground. I love watching these events. Why do you think it hasn't gotten to that next level yet? Even though we're on the way, why do you think we haven't gotten there quite yet?
Because number one, every sport needs a star, and jiu-jitsu has never had a star before. They've had dominant champions, but they've never had a star. So I think that's a big part of it. Like, basketball was big, but then when you have Jordan, it was just a whole nother level. Fighting was big, but then when you have McGregor, it's a whole nother level. So I think that grappling was big, relative to how the size of grappling. But now that we have like genuine stars in the sport, you're going to have, you're going to start pushing into that next level. And another reason is just because grappling is a participant-based sport. And if you look at like MMA, for example, or football, it's a spectator sport where most of the people who watch jiu-jitsu events are either one, practitioners, or two, family members of people competing. Like most normal people that don't train jiu-jitsu don't watch matches, don't watch like IBJJF Worlds matches, for example. Whereas most people who watch MMA aren't going to the gym to get punched in the face the next day. They're just spectators, they're fans, and they watch it. So the limit, grappling is always going to have a cap on the limit of how big it can get, because most people who watch grappling are people who also participate in grappling. So the viewership is going to be capped at a certain point. Like, it'll get bigger, but then it's never going to be like football, where like most people who watch football don't actually play football. Maybe they played football in high school or something, but they don't like seriously participate in football. So it's going to be like wrestling. It's going to grow to a degree, but there's always going to be a cap and a limit on how much competitors can get paid and how big the audience is going to be.
How much do you think signing with one could help boost that? Because, with them, you're exclusive to MMA. Like, if you decide you're with them, I'm sure they're loosey goosey in terms of where you compete grappling wise, but obviously they're going to want to put you on some cards too. But especially now with them being on TNT, some of these events being shown around the world, especially to a US audience at a pretty good time frame after the pro wrestling show, how much do you think, your appearance on maybe like a TNT show could help boost the sport of grappling in, the jiu-jitsu world?
Yeah. I mean, I think it'll be great just for the exposure, for myself as a brand and for our sport as a whole. And not only just, being on a big station like TNT around the US, but just getting, grappling to be a worldwide and international thing. I've competed all over the place, but most of what I do is in the US. Whereas now I'll be traveling to, all over Asia, all over, wherever one is, I'll be there. So, just a way for me to get, myself and my sport in front of a lot more eyes. And, I think what one is doing is really interesting. They have belts for all different combat sports. They have their kickboxing, they have MMA. And I think they're kind of striving to have a grappling belt as well. So if they give a title for jiu-jitsu, and they hold it at the same, put it on the same pedestal as they do their MMA and their other striking martial arts that they have. I think it'll be huge for grappling.
Has there been any discussion on when you might debut for them in the grappling world? Like, when you're is maybe sometime this year? Has that been talked about at all?
Yeah. So apparently they were talking to to Bishesha to do a match with me in late April. But he's focusing on MMA right now. So I don't blame him to compete against me on 4 weeks notice when you've been training for MMA. Like MMA and grappling is really different. So, Bishesha has made a decision to go in the route of MMA. And when you're not training grappling to go against someone like me without, preparing for it properly, it's kind of difficult. After the whole Andre Galvao incident, they also asked him, and of course he said no. That right now, I think they're just looking for opponents. They didn't mention any dates. They didn't mention any opponents. I think what they're going to find is what I've been finding. And I think it's going to be like nearly impossible for them to find a match for me, like a competitive match, like another high level grappler. I think that they can get like MMA guys, that are part of one to agree to matches maybe, or just like some guy that nobody knows, but to get like high level grapplers to go in there and face me, with any other promotion, it's like nearly impossible. So I think that one is going to start to have that issue now. And I told him, I'm like, listen, I'll compete against anybody. You just got to get him to sign a contract and show up. But it's been tough lately.
You mentioned Andre Galvao, and of course that thing just blew up like crazy. The whole thing talking a bit of smack after your win, and you're walking to the back to do an interview. He's saying things. You walk up to him and you smack him in the face. One we saw clear as day. The other we didn't really see on the Flow Combat video. It sounded like you slapped him a second time as well. What happened? Like, that was just wild stuff, man, and it escalated in this big way that like everybody was talking about it.
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't walk up to him. He walked up to me.
Right.
We were two of our teammates were competing. So he had Ronaldo competing and we had Craig competing. I went up to shake his hand. John shook his hand. I went to shake his hand and shake Ronaldo's hand after the match. And Ronaldo didn't shake my hand and Andre flipped me off. So I was like, okay, whatever. I just started laughing and that's who I am. And then I walked away and there was no big deal. So then there's like a little backstage area because it was in a hotel. There was no audience. And they basically just laid down mats in a conference room and put like black sheets around so you couldn't see anything in the background. And that was the competition stage. So the second you go out of the competition area, it's basically just like a dark room. And they have the sheets set up, and I walked through the sheets and Andre's like sitting there almost like he's waiting for me. And he like started cursing at me. And this is kind of weird because he's kind of off character because there's no cameras around. Oh, I thought there was no cameras around. So he like started calling me a bitch and a pussy, and I just started laughing. And then he started like walking towards me. And he was like, "Why are you running away?" So I was like, "Oh, I can't get punked like this." So I turned around and I'm like, "I'm not running." And then he like kept walking up to me, and he pushed me. And I was like, "Okay, well, that's like the most you can do before there's a fight." So I'm just assuming there's going to be a fist fight. So I was like, "Oh, let me start the fist fight off with a smack and see how he responds." So I smacked him the first time, and then there was no retaliation of any kind. And I was like, "Oh, I think that guy doesn't want to fight." So then I started walking away again because I had to do an interview. I started walking away again, and he started chasing me and walking up on me again while I had my back turned. And I was like, okay, maybe he wants to fight now. And he was like, oh, and then so I walked towards him like we were going to fight, and he kept walking towards me. So I smacked him again, and then he backed up, and he was like, talking. And then I went to go walk away another time, and he's like, oh, if I fight you, the cop's going to come, blah, blah, blah. First of all, there's a mutual combat law in Texas. If two parties agree to fight, it's perfectly legal to fight. So this doesn't make any sense. Second of all, I don't know what he expected, calling me a pussy, walking up on me and pushing me. I don't know what he expected to happen. That's like the most you can do before you get into a fight. So I was like, okay, if he wants to fight, let's fight. But then there wasn't a fight. So, I mean, I don't know. I was just rolling with the punches, and that's what happened.
I mean, anytime there's competitive things going on, I'm sure there's heat every so often from time to time. But is this the first time you actually like slapped somebody at an event like this?
Yeah. I mean, it's the first time that anyone was really confrontational with me outside of the mat. I mean, people do dirty things inside the mat, like Cyborg smacked me a bunch of times and got DQ'd at the Worlds, but that's all inside the competition stage. That's all on the mats. So as far as I'm concerned, stuff like that happens on the mats, and you leave it on the mats for the most part. Whereas Andre just confronted me like out of the blue, like when there was nobody around. And people don't talk about this, but could you imagine what people would say if like I was on camera getting pushed by Andre and then just like punking out and walking away, like I would never live it down. So I was like, okay, if he's pushing me, he wants to fight. So let me just start the fight off with a smack. But then that's not what he wanted clearly. So but I was just like, okay. And then I just walked away and did the interview.
If you could kind of like hop in the DeLorean and get sent back to that moment, knowing what you know now, like the attention that it got, knowing that there's cameras there now, would you do it the same way? Or do you think it would go down a little differently?
No, I think that was an appropriate response. I think it was just enough to send a clear message that you can't just bully me around. But not like, it wasn't enough to like seriously injure him, which I didn't want to do unless he wanted to actually fight me. But it was a clear message that, you know, if you it's just like the internet. If you start with me, I'm going to retaliate. If you walk up to me in person, you try to fight me, then we can fight. I mean, I don't know what everyone's like. Oh, Gordon only talks online, but when he's nice in person, yeah, I am. But like, if you're like serious and you like want to fight me, then we'll just fight. I mean, that's like the next step. It's not that big of a deal. We fight, we shake hands, and we go home, just like we compete.
Has there been anything that has come from that? Like, is there any like social media chatter? Like, has he reached out to you? Like anything?
Well, I didn't watch it, but apparently he issued an apology like a week later, and then just used the apology to promote a 50% sale on for his school website. So I was like, I don't know if Andre could make this any worse for himself, and he managed to make it worse for himself. So he used that, and people were like kind of buying it. They were like, "Oh, it's sincere." And then he's like, "Oh, and by the way, 50% off on Atos HQ," and then he just lost everyone there. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just waiting to see if he's going to do a super fight or not. And once he pulled out of the super fight, then I guess maybe we can call it truce. But you know, until then, he's still my enemy. I'm still fighting him, and in the ADCC super fight, and that's what it is. I don't think he's going to show up. I think he's going to milk it for as long as possible to get as much promotion as he can, and then he's going to pull out. Even if he officially agrees and accepts, I think he's just going to pull out with an injury, fake an injury or something later on to get as much promotion as he can, and then pull out later.
So is there like an actual date like not in place, but at least a date, like a tentative date for this super match?
So I think ADCC, they're having trouble because the refs couldn't get into the country because of the COVID restrictions. So they have to keep pushing back the trials. It was supposed to be September 2021, but now it's looking at almost like September 2022. So it's going to be like late summer, early fall for 2022.
Did you think that video would blow up the way that it did, that it would get the attention that it got?
I mean, yeah, I knew that. I mean, I smacked him, and because he was walking towards me. He didn't see the camera. So he was walking towards me, and I saw the camera was there, and he didn't see the camera was there. So then he tried like telling everyone that I walked up to him and punched him in the face, just completely unprovoked. And I'm like, yeah, it's not true. Like, wait till you guys see the footage. And they were like, oh, we have the footage. And it showed him like walking up to me, cursing at me and pushing me. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happened.
Do you watch a lot of MMA?
I do. It's not something that I study right now. I basically just watch it as a fan because I'm not getting ready to actually go out and fight those guys yet. But I mostly watch it whenever John has to study something that's important, or one of my friends is fighting, when George fights, or Gary fights, one of our teammates is fighting.
Have you been seeing or paying attention to what Mackenzie Dern has been doing as of late? Because I mean, she just got a big win on Saturday, and one of her big goals in MMA was, to shine some light on the grappling world and sort of represent it, so to speak. Like, have you been paying attention with what she's been able to do?
Yeah, I haven't followed her super closely, but I just saw she won again, and most of her matches have a lot of grappling in them. And I think that's great for someone who has so many eyes on her moving from grappling, because she has a huge following. She is she has way more following, way bigger following than I do. And someone with that many eyes coming from jiu-jitsu, moving into MMA, I think it's great that she can go out and showcase what we're about. Same thing with Damian Maia, same thing with Buchecha. I like when pure jiu-jitsu guys go out and are successful in MMA.
You excited to watch Buchecha make his MMA debut. He was supposed to, he's waiting for it. He's excited. Like you said, he's taken like the last year or so and really focused on that at American Top Team. But are you excited to see? Because I mean, you would essentially kind of be following eventually down the line, another guy coming from the grappling world, getting in MMA. Are you interested in seeing what happens there?
Yeah, I'm always super interested to see Buchecha. Interesting thing with Buchecha is, he's a heavyweight who can move athletically. There's a lot of guys. People don't realize how big Buchecha is. Buchecha's like 265. Like, people are like, oh, you should fight Buchecha in MMA. I'm like, guys, he's 55 pounds heavier than me. Like, we're not even close to the same weight class. But to have a guy that's that size that can move as quickly as he can is just inherently a problem for heavyweights, because heavyweights just historically are slower and less athletic. Buchecha can move, he can invert, he's explosive forwards to backwards, he can move side to side, he can go up and down. So I think that just his physicality alone is going to bring him very far. And I think that on top of that is the grappling aspect. If he can get the fight to the ground, is going to be a big problem for guys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Also looking forward to seeing what happens with you on the stage. Congratulations on this deal with One, Gordon. This is great stuff. Hopefully we can see you on one of these future cards, maybe on TNT. That would be a massive deal for you in the grappling world as well, to get on a big platform in the US and around the world like that. So looking forward to that. Thank you for the time, man. And all the best to you.
Of course. Thank you, guys.